Welcome to Geopolitical Horizon. This is part one of what is going to be a three-part series focusing on U.S. strategy. Today's program is called U.S. Strategy, the American Jobs Plan, and Central America. So last night I was reading the American Jobs Plan, which was published on the White House website on March 31st when it was presented. And the American Jobs Plan is basically a gigantic infrastructure plan, basically to rebuild the United States, both rural U.S. and urban U.S., in a range of sectors, building infrastructure, highways, railways, airports, educational facilities, health facilities. It is basically a huge range of infrastructure and capacity building across the US to really rebuild the US after decades of decay in infrastructure and a range of sectors across the United States. Now the thing is, this is a $2 trillion plan focusing only on rebuilding the United States. So while I was reading the American Jobs Plan, I was thinking, well, when is the international section going to come? Or when is the section focusing on Central America going to come? Because this continuing border crisis between the United States and Mexico, with massive amounts of refugees, coming across Central America up to the US, that just continues. So that's the thing I think is missing in this American Jobs Plan. It's very important, and I think is a very smart thing to be focusing on investing heavily in infrastructure in the US to rebuild, urban and rural US, build highways, railways, airports, economic corridors, strengthen, climate driven technologies. And all these issues I think are very, very important. But what is missing is the foreign international component. In this American Jobs Plan, I think it would have been important also to have an international section focusing on, for example, strengthening investments in Central America, rebuilding infrastructure across Central America, building economic corridors, really strengthening educational capacity, trade corridors, building ports, railways, airports, really focusing on investing heavily in Central America. I think that would be very wise in the long term. The reason is currently 50 to 100,000 refugees flow to the US border every month. That is a staggering number of refugees flowing. And I've seen that President Biden has been saying, don't come to the US. But, you can't really say to refugees, don't come. Because, refugees, they flee their home countries out of complete desperation. Countries across Central America are struggling with serious issues in relation to corruption, gang violence, instability, energy issues, and there's a range of challenges that Central American countries are dealing with. And the United States being such a powerful country bordering Central America, I think it would have been wise to really have a strategy to invest really, really solid in Central America, to rebuild Central America. To build and develop a variety of sectors, creating economic opportunities, creating really, Central America into becoming a growth region. That would, I think, have been very important in strategic thinking moving forward for the United States, so that the American Jobs Plan can focus, yes, on domestic capacity and infrastructure building within the US, but in addition also to strengthen perhaps, the most precarious, unstable region closest to the US right now, which is Central America. And also it's well known that, a lot of narcotics and drugs traffic flows, through Central America into, inner cities across the United States. And if Central America had been, really rebuilt as well and strengthened and become, an economic growth region, that would have dampened these risks. It would have taken away a lot of the challenges that lead to people fleeing towards the US. So I think thinking about the American Jobs Plan and thinking about, international development and economic, infrastructure development, industrial development, that I think is lacking in the American Jobs Plan. So in terms of the US strategic thinking going forward, now the American Jobs Plan, $2 trillion, that's $2,000 billion. That's a lot of money. So I think it's important for the Biden administration perhaps also to think about including an international component in the American Jobs Plan, because, the Biden administration already presented the American Rescue Plan, which it got passed in the Congress, which is basically now focusing on the COVID relief packages to US families, which is important. Now it is the American Jobs Plan, but then also President Biden said he's going to present an American Families Plan in a few weeks. So I imagine that will be focusing on families, across the United States, which is also important. But what about, strengthening US capacity for infrastructure investments, infrastructure building, and really drive industrial building and capacity development across the international scene. That's what China is doing. The US government and a lot of people across the US criticize China for building investments, and infrastructure around the world. The US can do the same going forward. And in the American Jobs Plan, in the first section, it's written that, we want to outcompete China by building infrastructure in the US. Now, I think it's important to build infrastructure in the US. I think it's a very valid argument. But by building infrastructure in the US, I'm not sure if that's going to outcompete China internationally. If the US wants to have any chance or, aim towards challenge or compete with China internationally in terms of infrastructure development, well, then you need to get on the international scene. So I think that the American Jobs Plan, while it's very important to develop an infrastructure across the United States, that's going to drive and create jobs and economic opportunities. I also think that the focus should be internationally. And the first region, I think, and the nearest is Central America. And then also, of course, the northern region in South America, Colombia, and other parts. So, while Central America should be the first region to focus on, and Vice President Kamala Harris now, being dedicated towards focusing on the border crisis, she should also think about, how really to develop and foster an economic plan for Central America and Latin America going forward. These are very important regions for the United States, being on the American continent. Therefore, I think this is very, very important to go through and really assess. And this is also something I think the academic establishment and the think tank establishment in the United States should really think about and focus on. Not only, security issues and, that there are challenges with security, of course, across Central America and in Latin America, but also really think about, investments, infrastructure investments, and dedicate strong focus towards that, because I think that is going to be critical going forward. If that doesn't happen, I think this refugee crisis on the US border, with refugee flows coming from Central America, is just going to continue in the coming months and years. Because if we go back to President Biden's press conference on March 25th, he told a story when he was a vice president during Obama's administration, and Vice President Biden, then he was in Europe, and he told a story that President Obama had called him, told him to fly back to the US, and really he sent him to focus on the border crisis. And what President Biden said, that when he was vice president, he had then, for example, supported various cities in Central America to have new lighting in very areas that were dangerous. And when the lighting was set up and built, then the crime rates went down. Now that's good, but that should have been just the beginning. That's 10 years ago. So the thing is, this is just going to continue and on and on. And building light in various cities and across various streets, that is good, but that should this should be the beginning. Building infrastructure, building energy, building industrial development, building educational centers, health capacity across Central America to really rebuild Central America to become a growth region that can provide opportunities, so that actually the whole North American, Central American, Latin American continent becomes a strong growth region globally. That, I think, is important to focus on also going forward. Well, thank you so much for joining, and I look forward to see you next week.